So I got her up on the bench of my, not really the bench, the outfeed table of my table saw, which doubles as a bench because it originated as a bench. So I got it up on there. I'm just going to start yanking the old electronics out. I'm going to try to salvage the spindle board and the spindle motor for now. Chances are that may change. I got to see if I can get schematics from Emco on this thing and see what goes where. I'm assuming that that's the spindle board. Big old Wampy transformer power supply in there and some other odds and ends. This is going to be an interesting one. Can't use any of the old stuff, unfortunately. It's just old, dated, and a lot of it's proprietary. So it's going to, like I said, pull it apart and just go all new with it. Going to go, I don't know if I'm going to go stepper, closed loop stepper, or if I'm going to go with servos on this one. I'm probably going to go with closed loop steppers, only for the price point. But I was thinking maybe those HSV, whatever they are, 57, the self-contained China servos. But first I got to see what the availability is on Mesa products, because I may be pilfering more from this thing than just one of the contactors to play with. I gotta put that back one of these days, but here we are. Let's spin this around. I think most of the weight of the machine is actually in this control board. So the rest of it, I laid it up on its side over here. I have zero room to work on this thing. This has pushed me beyond the limits of max capacity. But like I said, for the low price, I couldn't pass it up. So let's start yanking apart and see what's what. I want to try and see how free the screws spin and all that. There's a lot of grit and stuff on it, so who knows what kind of condition all that's in. So I got one of the servo motors from the Prolate mill here. It's way longer than the original stepper, but at least the faceplate fits on. That's a plate from the X-axis on the Emco. So it's definitely a NEMA 23 form factor. The one thing I did learn with the DMM servos is if you have the tap toll provisions built into your faceplates, chances are you might have to get the adapters that they supply as well, which then turns the motor itself on a 45-degree angle. So I don't know. I'm not so sure if I want to go DMM on this machine, or if I'm just going to go closed loop stepper, or maybe one of the other alternative servo providers, whatever. Kind of leaning towards those. I guess their Lead Shine supplies them, or one of the outfits. I'll get the part number, but it's like HS something 57. It's got the drive built into it and stuff like that. It's only a 180 watt motor, but it's more than enough to drive the Emco. And then I don't have to worry about mounting drivers into a cabinet or anything like that. So it's kind of tantalizing. We've got an email out to Mesa right now to see what their availability is on boards, or else I'm going to go overkill and put the 7995 in there. I'd rather not do that, only because I can get away with a $130 board versus a $250 board. Keep the cost low, and everybody will be better off that way. So I got most of the stuff out. I've got it all piled up on my joiner and close to the floor, but the front panel is hanging on by basically that white switch. Because it's all soldered in place. The wires are all zip tied together, looking like some kind of gimp from the Sadomasochist Club. And I was a little disheartened to find out that the spindle control board and potentiometer run off of mains power, so not going to help me in my pursuit to Linux CNC the original spindle. So time is going to tell how I attack that. I've got an email out to Emco. Michael was very helpful with the PC Turn 55. Hopefully he can come through with the Compact 5. But if not, all is not lost. It's just that getting an actual spindle motor for this thing is going to be a little costly. But we'll see how this all pans out. So I got the cabinet pretty much stripped down to the bare bones. A couple of things that I have to actually cut, and I wanted to make sure I got everything out before I go cutting anything. I don't like to cut anything. I like to pretty much salvage what I can, but in this case, there's going to be a lot more cannot. I could save the stuff, but I reached out to Emco. I still haven't heard anything back about drawings for this. So I figure, what the hell? These are components from the early 80s, maybe, or mid 80s, early 90s. So they're old. You know, the wiring is still good, but I mean, really, how long do capacitors last and stuff like that? So I just figure salvage what I can. If I can give these out to a good home, if I could find a good place for them, more power. What I am going to do, though, I think I'm going to remove the axis buttons and the rapid button, and I'm going to use those as sort of a retro homage to the control that once was. So I'll use those as my axis jog buttons on the actual panel itself when I get the new panel made up. But you ever do things that you're not 100% sure of why you're doing it at that moment, but then it just kind of hits you out of nowhere? Well, it does to me sometimes. And one of the things is the fact that I bought all of this stuff to do 7995 demos on and Linux CNC demos on. And now I've actually got a machine that, I mean, it might be a little tricky, but I want to see. Oh yeah, this just fits. I may have to find myself side mounting it, but it just fits. So, yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where you get that calling, like, you must buy all of these things. And why am I doing that? Go to find out, hey, I've got another machine that I have to retrofit, and, just so happens, I've got pretty much all the stuff. I don't want to use a 7995 board, only because that can go to a far greater use. So I'm waiting for Mesa to release the S version of the 7i7 or 7i96. So it's the 7i96S, and the difference is that it's not using a Spartan 6 FPGA. It's using a different FPGA, but it's also got an analog spindle output, which the 7996 proper does not have. So that's pretty exciting, because you get the smaller form factor, you get a little less I/O, but you're getting enough axis drives plus the analog spindle to drive this thing for for a lot less than the 7995 and a decent amount less than the 7976E. So that being said, I'm going to get a 7996S, and I have a new DC spindle motor control on order. I also have the DC servos that I mentioned. They have 8mm shaft. The original motors have 1/4-inch shaft, but ultimately these fit. So I've got new pulleys on order. I've got new belts on order. Pulleys were 4 teeth larger than the original 16 tooth, so these are going to be 20 tooth. So I've got longer belts on order. But because these have substantially more power than the old stepper motors, the difference in the gearing is not going to affect it at all. I mean, it might actually, this is going to be probably better. With that, I have new encoders on order because I don't know if I can use these. I think these are a proprietary protocol, something like that. I was reading some articles and they said, people said that they tried to use these and they just didn't have any luck. So I've got, what are they, AMT 102 encoders on order. They have the 102s, the 103s. The encoder is the same, but it uses a different plug style. And funny enough, on the 102s, the 6-foot plug is $10. And on the 103s, the 6-foot plug is $25. And they're the exact same encoder. They have the 2078 resolution. And despite being the same, the cabling is a little bit different. And I can't see $15 more for some wire, especially considering the 1-foot cable is only 50 cents more than for the 103 than it was for the 102. So that doesn't make any sense to me. But whatever. I digress. So the plan is to take these, as I got all of them now. And of course, I don't have the right plate, but you get the idea. So this servo will go here. It'll stick out a little bit, but it's not going to affect anything. On the x-axis end of things, this goes, which way? It goes this way, like so. So it just fits, clears by a 1/4 inch, whatever. So this cat's meow. And then the encoder wires and the power wire are going to run down under here. We got all the cable race stuff here for that. And then I've got Gecko G320X DC servo motor drives on order. And that will round out the package. I'll use the contactor, the WEG contactor that I've got. And hey, maybe I'll even put the safety relay in, whatever. So it is moving along. It's moving along quite well. And I know the motor, the DC motor works. That's why I went with the DC motor drive instead of trying to fiddle around with a new AC motor and VFD and all that stuff. I figure for what it's doing, the DC drive is fine. I mean, it came with the DC motor to begin with. So stick with that and it will. I don't think a VFD and an AC motor is going to affect the value at all, or that much to justify the added cost of that. So for $165, I can get a new DC drive that you plug in your mains power and you get 90 volt DC at 10 point whatever amps. So that should be more than enough to drive that motor. And again, 24 volt supply. This one here, the servo motors are actually 24 volt supply. So I'm going to use that to drive the servo drives, the Gecko drives, and it's probably got enough chooch for the IO, but I might do a smaller 24 volt supply just to have an isolated IO section. So stay tuned.